In this video, we are going to go over the components of the eye and how light travels through it. Here we can see the human eye. So first, as light comes through the front of the eye, it passes through the cornea. As we talked about before, the cornea is one of the lenses of the eye that focuses about 80% of light. Next, light passes through some fluid called the aqueous humor. Then we have the iris, which is the colored part of the eye. When we say that someone has brown eyes or blue eyes, we are referring to the color of the iris. The iris surrounds a hole called the pupil. Light travels through the pupil and then through the second lens of the eye called simply the lens. We also talked about the lens and how it focuses the other 20% of the light coming into the eye. After being further focused by the lens, light then passes through the bulk of the eye, a fluid called the vitreous humor. Finally, light reaches the back of the eye, which contains a layer of visual receptors referred to as the retina. The photoreceptors of the retina transform the light into neural signals that are then sent on to the rest of the brain. Now, when we focus on an object, that image falls on a specific spot of the retina referred to as the fovea. We will talk more about the fovea later, but this is where we have our most focused, detailed vision. Finally, there is a spot on the retina referred to as the optic disc. There are no photoreceptors here because this is where all of the cell fibers making up the optic nerve exit the eye. Now, let's go into each of these components in more detail. We'll start with the cornea. It is sometimes referred to as the primary lens of the eye since, as we've already talked about, it focuses the majority of light coming into the eye, about 80%. Its primary purpose is to bend light so that it hits one point on the retina, that fovea. It always bends light the same amount. It doesn't adjust its focusing power as objects are further or closer away like the lens does. It also serves to protect the eye. However, it is living tissue, so it is susceptible to injury, infection, and allergic reactions. In some cases, it can even develop scar tissue, so damage to the cornea can be a bad thing. As mentioned previously, sometimes the cornea isn't shaped perfectly, and light coming into the eye isn't focused perfectly onto the retina, resulting in myopia or nearsightedness, or resulting in hyperopia or farsightedness. I should clarify that the cornea itself isn't always to blame for myopia or hyperopia. There are other causes of myopia and hyperopia, such as an imperfect length of the eye. But either way, one way of correcting myopia or hyperopia is to reshape the cornea. Oftentimes, we just wear glasses or contacts, but in about 1980, procedures to fix our vision by altering the shape of the cornea were introduced. An earlier procedure, referred to as photorefractive keratotomy or PRK, was used to sculpt the surface of the cornea with an excimer laser. Laser-assisted in situ keratomylosis, or LASIK, was later developed. With LASIK, a small flap, less than the size of a human hair, is cut across the surface of the cornea, folded back, and then the cornea is sculpted so that light is then focused directly onto the retina. Then the top flap of the cornea is folded back across the eye. This promotes much faster healing and less discomfort than PRK. However, in some cases, PRK is still used today. Another condition typically caused by the cornea not being perfectly round is astigmatism. Astigmatism causes light to be bent by different amounts in different areas of the cornea. The cornea should be shaped like a round kitchen bowl. With astigmatism, the cornea is more elliptical or curved, like the inside of a teaspoon. As a result, lines in one orientation may be in focus, while lines of another orientation are blurry. often either horizontally or vertically oriented lines are affected, but not the other. Astigmatism can cause eye strain due to the person constantly trying to focus the visual image. It can be corrected with glasses or contacts. In the case of contacts, they are specially weighted so that they always remain at a specific orientation on the eye and don't rotate around the eye. Just behind the cornea and in front of the lens is a pocket of fluid called the aqueous humor. It basically plays the same role that blood does in other parts of the body. It supplies parts of the eye with oxygen and carries away waste products. It also helps to maintain the shape of the eyeball. The fluid is constantly recycled, fully about every 4 hours. Constant pressure is maintained by proper drainage of the aqueous humor. Glaucoma is a condition caused by a block in the outflow of aqueous humor. Basically, the aqueous humor is unable to drain properly and builds up in the eye, increasing the pressure inside the eyeball, referred to as intraocular pressure. If left untreated, it eventually causes blindness because the pressure damages the optic nerve in the back of the eye, which carries the neural signals from the photoreceptors of the retina. Glaucoma is the #1 cause of blindness in adults, and the chances of developing glaucoma increase after the age of 40. The damage caused by glaucoma is so gradual that it is usually difficult to notice that it is even occurring. That is why an ophthalmologist will usually do a number of tests for glaucoma at an eye exam. One of them is to check the pressure in the eye by applying a tiny bit of pressure using a tiny device pressed directly against the eye, or by a puff of air. That's never an enjoyable test, but next time you have it, you can think about how helpful it is since it is making sure the pressure in your eye is just right. Glaucoma is typically treatable. In some cases, a surgery called an iridectomy is performed by cutting a small hole in the iris to help drain the aqueous humor. Moving on to the iris. As mentioned before, this is the pigmented portion of the eye, what gives us our eye color. It is basically a muscle that expands and contracts to open and close the pupil, which then controls the amount of light entering the eye. It consists of 2 layers, an outer layer that contains the pigmentation, and then an inner layer that contains blood vessels. If our irises have heavy pigmentation, then we'll have more of a brown eye color. The lighter the pigmentation, the lighter the eye color. In some cases of lighter colored eyes, the blood vessel layer is partially visible. In rare cases, when a person or animal has no pigmentation, they will have a pinkish eye color because you can see right through the outer layer into the inner blood vessel layer. This is why albinos appear to have pinkish or red eyes. The pupil within the iris controls the amount of light entering the eye. You may have noticed that sometimes a person's eyes appear red in a picture that was taken with a flash. This is because the light of the flash is reflecting off of the retina and back out of the eye, and you are seeing the red of the blood vessels in the back of the eye. Considering the range of light that we can see, the pupil doesn't work as well as it seems it could. You may notice outside in bright illumination, a person's pupils are smaller, and when inside the dimly lit indoors, they are bigger. However, human pupils are rather slow to adjust to changes in light, and they tend to let in lots of light regardless of their size. As a result, our eyes were not designed very well to get around in the dark. However, about 20 times more light gets into the eye when the pupil is wide open versus when it is at its smallest. The size of our pupils is also affected by our emotions. So for example, they tend to dilate or get bigger when we are aroused or highly interested in something, when we are in pain, or when we are thinking intently about something. They tend to constrict or get smaller if we are disgusted by something or if our brains are simply overloaded with information. Studies have shown that we tend to like people with bigger pupils, maybe because that signals their interest in us or what we are saying, or because it can signal sexual arousal. Ancient Greeks were known to put drops from the belladonna plant into their eyes to make themselves appear more attractive. The belladonna plant contains the toxin atropine, which could make their pupils dilate. Not all pupils are created equal. The cat pupil, for example, is elliptical rather than round. It can control light much better than the human pupil can. We were not designed to get around in the dark, but cats were. Also, the cat has what's called a tapetum in its eye, which basically acts as a mirror on the back of the retina. As we will get into in a moment, light coming into the eye actually reflects off of the very back of the eyeball and is only picked up by the receptors of the retina as it is coming back through the way it came in, towards the front of the eye. So, in animals with a tapetum, such as cats, light that is not caught by a receptor in the back of the eye the first time is bounced back towards the back of the eye again and given a second chance at activating a receptor. Most nocturnal animals have eyes with a tapetum to help them detect more light at night. They are also responsible for the enhanced resulting glow of your dog or cat's eyes in photos taken with a flash. Now on to the lens. The lens bends light to allow focusing based on distance. So unlike the cornea, it can change in its thickness, a process called accommodation, in order to bring objects at various distances into focus. When we are looking at something far away in the distance, the lens gets thinner and less curved. When looking at objects close up, the lens gets thicker and more curved. Unfortunately, the lens ages poorly. With time, it becomes less and less flexible due to its hardening. This condition is referred to as presbyopia or old eye. By the age of 45, most people cannot read without glasses. The near point, which is the closest point for clear vision, moves further and further away. The near point for a typical 20-year-old is about 10 centimeters. By age 30, it's about 14 centimeters. By 40, it's about 22 centimeters, and by 60, it jumps to about 100 centimeters. The lens is constructed like an onion. It has many layers like sheets of tissue. With age, those layers of tissue continue to build. With time, however, the tissue receives less and less nutrients and becomes harder and loses its ability to change shape. The effects of presbyopia can also be due to the weakening of the ciliary muscles around the lens, which help control accommodation. Presbyopia is typically corrected with bifocals, since vision for objects close in front of us is affected, but vision for objects in the distance is typically unaffected or affected to a lesser degree. Another condition of the lens that occurs with age is the development of cataracts. Cataracts are opacities in the lens, which can be caused by a variety of things. They can either be quite small or can fill the entire lens. About 75% of people over the age of 65 have some sort of cataract, and about 95% of people over the age of 85 do. However, only about 5% of cataracts tend to be serious enough to require surgery. Treatment for cataracts typically involves the removal and artificial replacement of the lens. However, often even those who undergo surgery will still require bifocals to see properly. Making up the majority of the content of the eye is the vitreous humor. It is a transparent fluid, the consistency of egg whites. Like the aqueous humor, it too provides nutrition and support to the eye. However, it is not constantly renewed like the aqueous humor. As a result, it can accumulate debris over time. Sometimes we refer to this debris as floaters. Some of you may have actually seen them in your own eyes. If you look at a bright surface and a floater passes through the line of vision in the eye, it can cast a shadow on the back of the eye, and you can see the shadow. They move with the eye, so if you move your eye around, you should be able to see the floater move. And finally, we get to the retina at the very back of the eye. The retina is derived from the same tissue as the brain, and it is actually considered part of the brain. It contains our visual receptors called photoreceptors, which send visual signals to the rest of the brain. It has a quite complex layered organization, which we will get into in the next video.